Latimer Community Housing Trust, Raylee Kane and Rodney Rutledge. Oh, you're not Rodney,
No.
you're Jenny.
She is connected, however.
No, I know.
Where are you going to sit? I can sit there. Rodney apologises. I'm Raylee Kane. This submission will be short because it really is very much connected to the submission that was made by Te Whare Roimata. It's the same area, it's the same material. What's specific about this separate submission is that it drills down into the housing issue. And I just want to, and I think in some ways the solutions are the same. But so the Latimer Community Housing Trust, for those of you that don't know, is a very small housing project that's looking to build housing for low-income people and we have land in Barbados Street that we're trying to do that on. It started off, it's in some ways a response to the loss of the bed-sit houses in the inner city east. And it's been supported by the council through the Community Capital Endowment Fund and very strongly supported by the Community Board, the Rata Foundation, and recently we've started to work with Te Puni Kōkiri, who are looking at some specific solutions for the very large number of rough sleeping Māori men in our community. We estimate there's around 70 to 80 at any time. So, and we see that as an aspect of the whole issue of affordable and low-cost housing, not just in our area, but very particularly in the inner city east. And we do want to distinguish that from the proliferation of social housing that is also happening in the area, because we see this also as a complicating thing. It looks like there is a housing response in the inner city east, but in fact, the people living in those complexes have come through the social housing pathway and are not from the area, so it's not housing for the area. The other thing about that is something of an issue, that while the people are welcome and the regeneration is welcome, the services have not followed them. So it's adding to the load for social services in the area. What we want to say about that very specifically is that we think that there needs to be a more holistic viewing and solution to this, and I think perhaps it's embedded in what's been suggested, that the community, our community, work with hopefully council in taking some leadership on that and getting a bigger viewing of the housing issue, not just the street people, not just the new housing, but it's all part of a continuum and a complexity. The homeless community are attracted to the area. It's a tradition that they come to this area. Historically, there was availability of the cheap bed sits, even though they're no longer there. There is an established group there that they can hang out with, which means there is alcohol and drugs available. And it has proximity to services, of course, the City Mission and Te Whare Roimata. But the support that is available is insufficient and it lacks resources. So we want to see and be part of, as a community and as a housing trust, a more multi-agency solution to this. We would like to see a drop-in facility that Jenny put into her submission, where there can be some daytime showering, washing, cooking. And this material is also coming out of our discussions that we're having for Te Puni Kōkiri with homeless people. We submit that we think that this would be a very effective thing for council to initiate. And don't say do all the work, but initiate. We acknowledge that the City Mission works in this area, but their focus is citywide, and we're talking about this particular area. We also think there needs to be, a part of this discussion can be support of the residents that have moved into the new housing areas, many of whom have complex social needs. And many of those, not many, but some of those housing complexes are already proving problematic in their very design and for the people that live in them. There's some, for example, that are not properly insulated, and there's noise going between ground floor. It's creating a lot of community tension. Part of it, of course, is also the regeneration of the village that was talked about in Jenny's submission, and I'm very heartened by the idea that there be some sort of joint effort, a partnership with council to try and look at the whole picture, and our submission is that housing is a critical part of that. And that's all. With 4 minutes to spare.
Very good. Questions? Andrew?
Your commentary on social housing is interesting, and certainly the comment that, social housing fulfills its need but brings different people into the area, new people into the area, rather than necessarily catering for the people who see that area as their part of town, as home, as a community that they're part of. Do you think that means that there's a need to look at different types of social housing, or perhaps a different type of placement policy to ensure that those needs are able to be met through social housing?
Well, we do. Yes, we do. I think both of those things could happen if, at the moment, it feels to us like there is a particular pathway that guides people into the social housing that's built. So I think there could be a much wider look at it. I do think that, yes.
I wonder too if we could just say that there are a number of people in the inner city who are not in good quality housing, but don't qualify for social housing because they're seen to be housed. And I guess the type of housing that the Latimer Community Housing Trust is promoting is quality, energy efficient housing for displaced people, rehousing local people, which is slightly different from the emphasis of some of the social housing work that's going on.
Yep. Phil?
Thanks, Raylee. One group who you've referred to is who are displaced among all the people are the single men. I'm just wondering, is that sort of a group who need some social housing and have some special needs and maybe need to be catered for in a special way? I just wonder what your view is on that.
Some of them.
I think it's fair to say, Phil, that the work that like Jamie and myself and others have been doing around that, it's very clear that there's a raft of needs and that one size fits all won't work. And we're talking about from people who are chronic or active addiction through to those who are very ready to go into housing, and it's how you support. And we're talking sometimes about the wet house kind of concept that Rayleigh's going to run through to housing, or it could be that it's the drop-in, because for some it's a choice. That's their preference, and we need a variety of options.
Yeah, a day base.
Yeah.
Any others? Aaron?
Yeah, I see a potential issue coming up for the whole area as there's a bit of a gentrification coming on, and there's probably going to be a whole lot of billboards go up pretty soon selling really nice apartments in by Latimer Square through the Eastern Bloc, and often in cities, as the value of the city goes up, the poorer areas, or the ones that are perceived to be the poorest, are the ones that are next up for redevelopment. And close to the inner city, it's either the inner city east, or in and around Sydenham. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on those places. How do you see the two fitting together?
For years, Te Whare Roimata advocated that you can't deal with housing without also dealing with city plan issues. And we looked at some of the American type responses where developments must ensure that there's always low cost housing, a percentage of each development, or that you make certain that that is maintained, and that you also look at, because the reality is that a lot of low cost housing, it's not in the interest of developers, that they're not going to get the cost, and that's where we do do need to have other varieties of ways of responding. Loan money, if you look at the States, there's a lot of money that's available, philanthropic type money for groups like us to be able to be part, and that's the type of thing I think New Zealand's got to be able to begin to start looking at. Now we get the state is getting out of providing in that way of being a provider of housing.
So have you looked to become potentially one of those models? And it's good that you mentioned the States, because I saw one in San Francisco where they've done exactly that because of those problems in the peninsula. It's 1.1 million people and like quarter of the size of Christchurch. They have to do what you say to fit them in, because they're there, they exist, and they've always been there. And have you looked to partner like that or become a larger provider?
We've had, if dare I say it, quite a number of years of getting to this point, and that would be our long-term dream, that we get one complex and then we're able to leverage and get another complex. That would, and look at other ways. I mean, there's some brilliant things we've heard recently in the States are doing that would be wonderful to look at.
It's extremely difficult to become a charitable trust developer, isn't it?
Well, maybe you need to look for partners is the way to go in that regard. But thank you very much for your contribution to the discussion on the annual plan. Much appreciated. Thank you.